Well, they say time flies when you're having fun, and that seems to be happening because we already have reached the last of the days of the first week, day 5, and it's time to unveil our big project, which, as you know, is your own personal career alter ego for your website, answering questions about your professional history. And I want to say one more time that last time we talked about the different agentic frameworks and how there are simple ones and complex ones. Everything we're doing this week is with no framework at all. We are interacting directly with models, which is incredibly important because it gives you that foundational knowledge about what's actually going on under the hood. So that when we start to build on all sorts of clever frameworks that abstract this away, you have good insight into what's really going on behind the scenes. But that's the end of the intro. It's now time to go straight to the lab because for today, it's going to be a ton of coding. Let's get to it. And here we are back in Cursor and we go back into the first week foundations. And now we're on lab 4, the first big project, Professionally You, I'm calling it. It's going to be your personal career alter ego. And it's going to include dual use as promised. I know we covered it in the last lecture, but it's going to now make its appearance. First, I want to introduce you to a nifty little tool called Pushover, which people from my last course will remember fondly. It is a nice little tool, and I have to have my phone off silent because we're going to be using it. So I do apologize if I get things like text messages and stuff, but it's important, as you will see. Pushover is a cute tool that lets you send push notifications to your phone. If you're used to using something like Twilio that lets you send text messages, Twilio used to be very easy to use, but now there's so much regulation around SMS that it's actually quite hard to get things together to send even yourself a text message. Pushover is super simple and it's free, at least I think for the first month. I'm now paying some tiny amount, but it's free for the first month, so you've got plenty of time. You simply go to pushover.net and it's super clear. You set up an account on the top right. You get an API key and you actually get 2. You get like a user and a token, and you have to put that in your .env file so that it's going to be available here. And you also install an app on your phone called Pushover, which I have sitting right there. And the reason you do that, if I do run a few imports right here, and now I'm going to do the usual load.env, which is going to include my pushover user and token now. And I'm going to create the OpenAI library. All right, so my pushover user is in that field. My token is in that. And this is the URL of the endpoint for sending push notification messages. And so this function here, push, is all it takes. Basically, you just do a request stop post to that URL, to that endpoint, and you pass in some data, and that data has the user token, the token, and the message itself that you want to push to your phone. It's just the end of it. Nothing. I mean, this is how all things should be, just super simple. So I should be able to run this function here, hey, and it should come up on my phone right now. There you go. I hope you heard that loud and clear. I'll do it again. There we go. And I see hey twice. And that is a cool way to be able to notify yourself of things through code without having to worry about SMS regulations and things like that. Okay, that's Pushover. Please install it when you have a moment, because we're going to use it not just this time, but we're going to use it in other projects as well. It's a useful thing to be able to do. Okay, now I'm going to introduce you to 2 innocent looking functions. One of them is called record user details, and the other is called record unknown question. And these are 2 tools that I'm going to want to equip our LLM with so that it can do these things. It's going to be able to record if a user wants to be in touch with us. And it's going to be able to record if a user asks a question that it doesn't know how to answer. And by record, what I mean is it's going to send a push notification to my phone, so I know immediately if someone does that. And so it's going to say that it's recording that someone, a person, with this email and these notes, and it's going to return that they're recorded. So that's a useful thing to be able to do. And if it gets a question it doesn't know, it's going to push recording that a question was asked. Why don't we make this a bit more descriptive? That I couldn't answer. Answer, there we go. So now it's nice and clear. Recording interest from, there we go. Okay. So the idea is we want to turn these into tools that our LLM can use. Now, remember I told you that at the end of the day, tool use is just JSON and if statements, and that is what you're going to see right now. Here is some JSON. It's quite long JSON. It's quite verbose. And one of the things that the agent frameworks do is they sort of do all of this for you automatically. So you won't have to worry about this again, because a lot of this stuff is very boilerplatey, a lot of standard JSON. But this JSON right here, record user details JSON, is a blob of JSON that refers to this function. It describes the capability of being able to call that function. It gives it a name, record user details. It says, why might you want to do that? Use this tool to record that a user is interested in being in touch and provided an email address. And then we specify the parameters. There's one called email, one called name, one called notes. Look, here it is, email, name, and notes. And we give each one a description. And we say that email is required and that there aren't additional properties. So you may be wondering what this is about. The thing to keep in mind is that this is the information that's going to be sent to OpenAI. We're going to say to it, you have the ability to do this. Tell me if you want me to run it for you, and I'll tell you the answer. So that's what's going on here. It's like a packaged way of describing what this function does in JSON format so that the LLM can decide in its response whether or not it wants to actually call this tool. And then very similar for record unknown user question. We give it a name, the name of the function. We give it a description. And this is what the LLM will use to decide whether or not it's appropriate to use this tool. And then we say that it has one property question, which is a string, the question that couldn't be answered. And that is the end of that. Let's run this and run this. Okay, if I run everything. I didn't run the functions themselves. It's always, if you fail to run things, then you're going to get a name error later. It's something to watch out for. So always come back and make sure that you've run all of your cells. Okay. Final step for this is that we're going to put both of these blobs of JSON into a list of tools. The type is function, and the function is that function. So now this blob of JSON is a big blob of JSON. Let's have a look at it. Print tools. And you're going to see it's, actually what happens if I just do it like this? That might look better. There we go. It does look better. This is what tools now is. It is this big chunk of JSON, boilerplatey JSON, which describes the two functions that we're providing with a name, a description, the parameters, and so on. And this, putting things in JSON, is a language that LLMs are good at understanding because it's in lots of their training data. And so that's going to help us to be able to interact with OpenAI. So this next part is the most important part. It's also probably the most complex. Now, you're comfortable with the fact that we are going to be sending this JSON to the LLM and giving it the option to reply when it generates its response. It can opt to say that it wants to run one of these tools. It wants to run this tool, or it wants to run this tool. So the next thing that we've got to do is write a function which is going to handle what happens when the LLM responds and says, yes, I do want to run this tool, please run it and provide me with the output. So that is the purpose of this function that I've written right here called handle tool calls. And it's a function which takes a list of tool calls and it will run them. And it will add the responses to the results that it returns. So it has a loop. It loops through these tool calls. Typically, a model will only call one tool at a time, but actually the construct supports multiple tools being run. And so we want to support that here. So we do that. So we loop through all of the tool calls. We look at this, what's come back in this tool call. And I should say, this is actually, it's a structured output. It's JSON coming back from the LLM that's been put into an object. And so this is one of the reasons why I said it's very analogous to structured outputs. So back has come this JSON object. It's in the form of an object tool calls. And we are going to look at the function name that it's providing back in that response. And we are going to be calling that the tool name. And that is the name of the function it wants to call. And it also provides us with the parameters, the arguments that should be put into that function. Then we can strip them out like this. And so I'm then just going to print, we're calling this tool. And what comes next is an if statement, just like I promised you. We say, if the tool name is record user details, if it wants to call this tool, then we call the function that's called record user details, and we pass in the arguments. But conversely, if the tool is this tool, record unknown question, right here in the JSON, then we call the function called record unknown question, and we pass in the parameters. And then we add in whatever came back from that function call into the list of messages. And that's what we return. So that is the extent of the handle tool calls function. And as I told you, it's got this if statement. So hopefully that's more concrete for you. You see that coming together. And if not, come and look through this and get comfortable with it. Okay, and what I've got next is something a bit sneaky. When you look at this, you might think to yourself, this is a bit dumb. We've got this thing that looks for a string and then calls a function with the same name, and looks for a different string and calls a function with the same name. And we know that Python is full of magic stuff. Isn't there a way in Python to do a sort of reflection thing and just call that function with the same name as that string? And the answer is yes, of course there is. And this is one way of doing it that works in this particular situation. There is this thing called globals, which gives you a dictionary which you can use to look up any function which is in the global scope. And so I can use that to look up a function called record unknown question. And that will give me the actual function, record unknown question. And I can then call it like that. This is a really hard question. So if I run this, it should send a push notification to my phone. Let's see. Yep, that seemed to work. I see, recording. This is a really hard question. So that works. Let's do it again. Oh, it makes it worth it pinging when I get emails. So yeah, there you see that this trickery works. And of course, that means that I can rewrite the handle tool calls function and do it this way, so that now basically there's no more if statement. I've got that cunning piece of logic in there that plucks out the right function and then dynamically calls that function like that. And I can see that it would be better to do this for sure. So yeah, this obviously gives us a workaround to having the if statement that we had before. But I don't want you to think for 1 minute that means that this isn't just a glorified if statement, because that's all it is. Sure, we've got some trickery to use a dictionary to look up that has got around having to list things out. But at the end of the day, it's still the same thing. We're just taking some text and we're using that to map to a function name and we're calling that function. It's a glorified if statement, nothing more. So that's how this works. And I hope that this now gives you a bit of perspective of what's going on. The good news is you're never going to have to do this again after week 1, because all of the other frameworks take care of this kind of stuff for you. You don't need to futz around with plucking out JSON and turning it into function calls. That's exactly what these frameworks did. It's people that wrote stuff like this and thought, you know what, it would be easy just to put this into a nice little framework so that people don't have to worry about this anymore. So you won't have to worry about it anymore after this. But I wanted this to give you a real perspective on how it works, what's going on, so that you've got that foundation. And when you actually get to use the frameworks, you know exactly what it's actually doing. All right, now it's the moment of truth. We now read the LinkedIn profile in as before, and hopefully this is your LinkedIn profile, not mine. And then we bring in the summary text. You should change this name to be your name, and we run that. And we now have our system prompt and user prompt for the LLM. And the system prompt is going to be the same as last time. You're acting as me or you. You're answering questions on their website, particularly related to their career, etc., etc. But there's a twist. At the end here, it says, if you don't know the answer to any question, use your tool to record the question you couldn't answer. And if the user's engaging in discussion, try to steer them towards getting in touch via email, record it using your tool. Now, in theory, this isn't needed because the JSON that we've written to describe the tool already gives this kind of context and describes the tool and when it should be used. But it never hurts to be repetitive in prompting. As I'm sure you know, repetition always works well. Explain things several times over because you will increase the probability that your model performs the way you want it to. You're biasing the model to be outputting tokens consistent with your objective. And it is important to always keep that in the back of your mind. We often like to talk about, the model calls this tool, and we make it sound like that it's almost got something that has true autonomy. But all that's actually going on here, and always remind yourself of this from time to time, an LLM is just something that's generating the most likely next tokens to follow a sequence of tokens. It's got an input and it's generating, like predictive text, what is the most likely text to follow this. And if we've inserted into this prompt stuff about different tools that it could call and stuff that directs it to use them, then that just means that the most likely next tokens will be consistent with that information that we passed in. And that's all that's going on. It's about statistical most likely tokens. And that really, it hurts my mind to try and think that one through because it seems so unlikely that predicting next tokens could be so powerful as to do things like calling tools. But that really is what's happening here. All right, that was a sidebar, but it's an important sidebar. You should always try and keep that in mind. And I have a bunch of YouTube videos about that stuff if you want to learn more about how next token prediction is able to achieve these things. Okay, so with all of this, we get to our chat function again. And this is where it really comes down to action, and we'll cover it in the next video. Okay, this is the single most important moment of the entire lab. So it's the chat function, and I've spaced it out a bit to really explain what's going on. It's a more powerful chat function that includes the calling of a tool. It starts exactly the same way as it did before. We create some messages. Role of system, the content is the system prompt. We add in the history from before. Role of user, the content is the user's message. And now do a pretty standard trick of looping again and again and again until a variable called done gets set to true. So it's going to keep going until done is true. What is it going to keep doing? It's going to call OpenAI. And this is the usual thing, openai.chat.completions.create. We're familiar with that. We pass in the model, we pass in the messages, this set of messages. But look, we also pass in tools. Tools is that JSON blob, that structure of JSON, which is going to be sent to the LLM saying, these are all the things you can do. This is the description of everything you can do. All right, and back it comes into response. And what comes in response might just be the output to go to the user, or it might be a response that indicates that tools need to be called. So that is what we do next. We look at response.choices0.finished And this tells us whether the LLM is finished and is done, or whether it wants to call a tool. So if the finish reason is tool calls, it wants to call a tool, then we look at the message itself, we pluck out the tool calls from it, and this is where we call that function that we just wrote, that clever function, that sneaky function. Right here it is. Remember it, handle tool calls. This is the one that is the glorified if statement, the one that has the fancy if statement. But there's also this more silly version here that just has an actual if statement. But it's going to call this. So back we go. So again, if it wants to call tools, then we do that. We handle the tool calls. We call the tools. And then into the set of messages, we put what it wanted to do and the results of doing it. And then we will loop back and call a second time. And we will keep doing this until the finish reason is not tool calls. It does not want to call tools with whatever it's just responded. In which case we return the content because that is going to be the actual response to the user. I hope that made sense. If not, go through it slowly, carefully until it does. This is pivotal. This is how the whole thing hangs together. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, it's all very well showing us all this code, but does it actually work? Well, let's find out. Let's run the code. Here we have it. Let's say, hi there. Hello, how can I assist you today? What's your job? I'm currently the co-founder and CTO of Nebula. Very nice. Do you have a patent? Yes, I do. Very nice. Who is your favorite musician? That's what I want to know. I hope you heard that. Success. So it says, I'm not sure about my favorite musician. I appreciate a variety. If you have a favorite, I'd love to hear about it. It called the tool. You heard my phone go. We have success. The agent was able to take that JSON. It knew that this was a tool that it could call. It was able to respond with the finished reason was tool calls. And that caused us to interpret that, to make the call to our function handle tool calls, which had our fancy code that ended up calling this function, that ended up calling pushover, that then sent the push notification to my phone. And it all hung together. All right, let's keep going. I'd like to get in touch. That's great to hear. Please share your email address. I'm at ed@edwarddonner.com. I know you're expecting it now. The magic's worn off. You're not impressed anymore. Well, I think that's really cool. So it has indeed, of course, notified me about my own email address, which is great. And so it shows you that it does hold together, and you are indeed able to have these interactions and get it to text you. Okay, that's great. I hope you enjoyed it. But next, it's all about doing this for you and actually deploying this live to production so that you can serve your own avatar on your personal website. So if you've followed everything so far, then many congratulations. If you haven't, then also congratulations, because it gives you this great opportunity to go through, work through this until you do. And if I can help, email me, contact me anytime, LinkedIn with me, message me so that I can help you out. So what I want to do now is show you how you can deploy this application in production for yourself so that you can have this as your virtual resume. Surely this is the future of resumes. No longer will we have profiles or CVs, resumes, where you list out your skills and experience, but rather you'll have a chatbot that people can interact with to learn about your career. And what better way to highlight your AI abilities and your abilities to work with agentic AI than to have an agentic solution up on your website that will allow you to interact with people and talk about your career. So let me show you some steps to deploying this. So the first thing to do is to put the code into a Python module. And I have done that right here for you in app.py. And you'll see that this has all of the stuff you would expect. It's got the same information in here, but organized into nice little functions. At the top are the functions that cover the tools that we call. And then there is a class me, as in me or you. And that's something which has the handle tool call that we know so well. That's right here. And it has the system prompt and this loop that we just went through, this chat loop that has the while not done. It calls openai.chat.completions.create. It passes in the tools. I don't think I mentioned this actually, so I'm pleased I paused for a minute here because I do want to show this one more time. We call chat completions create. We select the model, we pass in the messages, and we pass in the tools JSON, the description of the tools that it can call. And with what comes back, we take choices 0 and we look at the finish reason back in the response, and we see whether or not that is tool calls. And if so, then we loop through to make sure that we run all of the tools before calling it again to get the final response. So this is so critical, this chat with its loop, that I do encourage you to take a look at it. And now at the bottom here, we have the Gradio code. We've got it set up here so that if this is just run as it is, then it will create a Gradio chat interface with showing me.chat and with the messages, and it will launch it. So what I can do now, in fact, is I can bring up a terminal, which you may remember, you press Control and the backwards tick mark. I can go into the week 1 folder. Here we are. And now I can now type, remember, you don't type Python, you type UV run to run something in this way. UV run app.py. And if I run that, then it should come up. So this link now, on this link, I can press Control and click it to bring it up. Up it comes. Let me make that a bit bigger for you. This is now an app running on my box, and I can say, hi there. Hello, how can I assist you? And do you have a patent? And so on. And there we go. Okay, so that works. Going back here, what we now want to do is look at actually deploying this. So there are various ways you can deploy an application like this, but one of them that's particularly simple and elegant is brought to you by the lovely AI company HuggingFace, which also happens to be the company that owns Gradio, that beautiful framework. HuggingFace has something called HuggingFace Spaces, and HuggingFace Spaces is a way that you can deploy things really simply. And then if you wish, you can also embed them in your own homepage. So it gives you a really nice, simple way to do it. So this is how you do it. You first have to go to Hugging Face's website and set up your own account if you don't already have one. So you may already have a Hugging Face account, but if not, you need to set one up. Once you've done with that, you go into the Foundations folder in a terminal and you run this command, Gradio deploy. It's then going to ask you a series of questions, a bunch of simple questions to which I've got the answers you have to give right here. And I'll go through and do it right now, but I'm not going to do it properly because one of the questions it's going to ask you about some secrets that you'll say yes, and you're going to provide your OpenAI API key so that it can use that in the deployment. And you can also give your pushover tokens as well. And then I have got the rest of the instructions right there for you. And once that's done, it will be deployed into a Hugging Face space. And you can choose whether that is public or private. You can have it be private if you don't want other people abusing your key. Although, as I say, it's super cheap. It would have to go viral for you to have any kind of significant spend. And of course, make sure that your OpenAI account, you never want to have that auto refilling so that if that ever were to happen, if your app did go viral, then you would be protected. And anyway, OpenAI has limits, as you probably know. So let's go and actually do this. Let's run Gradio deploy. So I'm going to bring up the terminal now, and then we will go and do this ourselves together. Okay, so here I am within Cursor, in the terminal in Cursor. It's a bit confusing. You can see that's this bottom half of the screen, and I was originally in the agents directory, and I went into the Foundations subdirectory. So that's where I am right now. And this is, of course, the same directory that has app.py. And now I type these two words, Gradio deploy. That's it. So when I run that, it's going to create a new Spaces repo for me. And now we need to give it a title for the app. And we're going to call it Career Conversation. But I'm going to call it Career Conversations 2. Because I already have a number one. Enter Gradio app file. Well, it's app.py. That is our Gradio app file. So we could just press enter to accept it as it is. Enter Spaces hardware. So we want CPU-basic. That is the simple, cheap, free, not cheap, it's free version of Gradio Spaces. You will not have to pay for this. Any Spaces secrets. And now we have to say, yes, there are spaces. Enter the secret name. So we have to type OpenAI API key. And we have to get this right. If you get it wrong, there is a way to edit it later, but try and not get it wrong. And now we have to enter the actual value, the OpenAI API key. And I'm, of course, not going to enter my API key right now. Otherwise, all of you guys will see it right away. But I'll put in a fake key. We'll do sk-proj-blah, blah, blah. And enter a secret name. There are two more secrets that we need to add. Do you know what they are? They are, of course, the pushover user and whatever that is, and the pushover token and whatever that is. And that is it. And it says enter blank to end. So I just press enter and that's it. Create a GitHub action to automatically up the space. And the answer is no. So I can just press enter to say no. And that is now running. And it's done. The space is available at that URL, just like that. So I should now be able to click on that and launch it and see my space in action. Open. And here it is, it's still building. So it takes a minute to build, but luckily my old one is still running over here. So I'm just going to flip over to that. You can see this is the address, huggingface.co spaces, my user ID, and then career conversation. And I can say, hi there. And it's thinking about that. And it says, hello, how can I help you? I'm going to make sure my phone is on noisy so that we can experience this. Do you have a patent? Yes, I hold a patent. I'd love to hear more about the patent. Can I get in touch? Absolutely. Share your email address. I'm ed at edwarddonner.com. Ha ha ha. You like that? So there we go. And it's come through very nicely. And I'm happy to say that I've been alerted about my own email address. So hopefully that is clear for you. You now see that, hang on, if I take this off, hopefully the other one has now deployed as well. Career Conversations 2 is right there. There it is as well. So I now have 2 Career Conversations. So this is how you can interact with a deployed app. And also Hugging Face gives you a great way that you can just embed this in your own website. So I have a number of Hugging Face spaces that run on my website. Like I've got this Connect 4 game that you can play against different LLMs. And this is just a Hugging Face space. But if you look, it looks like it's just coming from my own personal website. You can do the same thing. The instructions are on the Hugging Face Spaces site. And that way you can have your web page having embedded within it your career conversation where people can come to your website. They can have a virtual conversation with your avatar about your career, about your interests. If they say something that it doesn't know how to answer, it's going to send you a push notification with the question so that you know it right away. And if they're willing to give their email address, then it's going to notify you with their email address so that you can get in touch. So that is a deployed app that you have running and that you can interact with and use it as your own personal career avatar. So I know this was a lot to take in, but I hope that you found it very satisfying, a real application that you can put to good use. The more information here about how you do that deployment with the instructions, and now the exercises for you. And this is the real end of week 1 exercises that you need to take seriously because these are important. First and foremost, of course, to state the obvious, you should build this yourself. It's a valuable tool. It's really cool. You should deploy it. It is the future of resumes, an interface you can chat with about yourself. And next, of course, you should improve the resources that are supplied to the chatbot. This is very vanilla, just a LinkedIn profile. You can add much more detail about your background. You can add in lots of important stuff, and you could give answers to all of the typical career-y kinds of questions. So you can make sure that you've got a really robust knowledge base of data there. If you know how RAG works, you could implement RAG. You could put in a Chroma data store. If you've done my LLM engineering course, then you know this stuff super well. You could build that in there and you could have it doing something that has like a bunch of different documents that it's able to refer to in giving good answers with relevant context. And then you should add in more tools. You could have a tool that can make a SQL query to a database to look at prior questions that couldn't be answered, and a database where it could add in questions that require an answer. So you could have something that's quite interactive where the LLM is able to add questions to a database, and it can text you and then it will send you a push notification, and then you can come in and add the answers, and it will then provide the answers later to the user. So you could add all of that stuff, which would be really interesting. And then the final exercise for you, of course, is that you may have noticed that whilst in the last lab, we built an evaluator, I didn't actually include the evaluator here because it just felt like that was too much for one lab. But you should now bring that back. Let's have the evaluator in there to make sure that all of the responses that people give are very professional and crisp and do well. So These are all good exercises for you to get involved in. And there's also plenty of user interface stuff you can do to make this nicer. You can make that Gradio app look prettier for sure. If you could just ask ChatGPT to give you some advice on Gradio apps. And if you know how to stream back results, again, if you've taken the other course, then you should add that in, of course, too. And to wrap this up, I just want to talk about the commercial implications. I always do want to bring it back to that. I mean, the obvious point here is that this is commercially already useful because you can use it for yourself to attract clients and perhaps even future bosses. But also you can extend this kind of thinking to any business situation where you are building AI assistants, which is one of the very most common use cases commercially for agentic AI. This ability for it to interact with the real world through tools is what really sets something from being just a vanilla chatbot on a website to being something that is actually commercially valuable. It could be something which doesn't just tell you about ticket prices to travel somewhere, but it can then actually go and interact and book the tickets. That's the kind of, that's the leveling up that you get with the use of tools and using structured outputs and providing more resources in the prompt. So this is really the bigger commercial opportunity. Look for ways that you can have this kind of tool-enabled AI assistant and see how that could be applied in your day job. And with that, congratulations. That is a wrap on the first week of this course, foundational week. Think of everything that you've built up over the course of the week, understanding what agents are and agentic patterns, orchestrating between multiple different APIs and building some of those patterns, the use of resources and tools, and then bringing them all together into an actual app that's useful for you right now. And maybe for some people, if you were learning tools for the first time, I probably unloaded a lot on you today. And I would just urge you to take it as something to give you some intuition for how this works. You won't have to do that again, but it's great to know how it works. And it's good to go through that code and see it step by step. For people that do know about tools and have used them before, maybe even you took the course, which means that the LLM engineering course, which means that we spent a week looking at tools, then this may have helped to the elegant way that we packaged up the use of tools. It shows you how we can be quite flexible with this, making the analogy with structured outputs and seeing how that fits together. And this will all help you to appreciate when we go into OpenAI Agents SDK, for example, and we're just calling tools, you'll know really clearly what's going on behind the scenes. And that is the perfect segue, because next week it is all about OpenAI's Agents SDK. And as I'm sure I will tell you then, and I'll tell you now, that happens to be my very favorite one of the agentic frameworks. So I'm so happy that we're getting to it right away. I can't wait for week 2. It's going to be a blast. I'll see you there.